Mike Flynn's son, Mike Flynn Jr., his alleged role in that effort to collude with Russian hackers in the campaign, that was exposed by the Wall Street Journal in June. Now, today, NBC cites 4 current and former government officials to report that Michael Flynn Jr. is a subject of Robert Mueller's inquiry, as, of course, is Michael Flynn Sr. And today, things got much worse in the reporting about him. Back in June, Jeff Stein, who's really well-sourced on intelligence issues, Jeff Stein reported for Newsweek back in June that one of the business dealings that Mike Flynn Sr. never disclosed when he got to Washington was a Russian partnership he was pitching to build 16, count them 16, nuclear power plants in Saudi Arabia. Probably isn't one of them. Jeff Stein published this piece in June about Mike Flynn's involvement in that business plan, and about Flynn taking a trip to the Middle East to meet with people and to promote this Saudi-Russian-financed nuclear deal. Because Mike Flynn never disclosed anything about this on his security clearance applications or on his White House financial disclosures, that's Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, Eliot Engel, and the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee, Elijah Cummings, to write to Flynn's reported business partners in that deal to try to get more information about this would-be gigantic Russian business deal that Flynn was involved in that he never disclosed. Well, today, that blew up. It all started with that reporting in June about Flynn's involvement in that deal, but today is the day it blew up. And you can see the chronology unfold here, right? So in June, there's this Newsweek story about the Russian nuclear deal and Mike Flynn. In June, right after that, Eliot Engel and Elijah Cummings write to the business people Flynn was working on this deal with, and they ask for information about it. Those folks respond to that letter. They send to Congress the requested information about this would-be Russian deal and Mike Flynn's involvement and Mike Flynn's trip to the Middle East to promote it. And now this morning, Elijah Cummings and Eliot Engel make the whole thing public. Quote, "We are writing today to thank you for your responses and to request additional information. First, your responses provide multiple independent confirmations that General Flynn traveled to the Middle East to meet with foreign government officials and foreign business associates in June 2015 to promote this U.S.-Russian nuclear power project. Based on your responses, it appears that General Flynn violated federal law by omitting this trip and these foreign contacts from his security clearance renewal application in 2016 and concealing them from security clearance investigators who interviewed him as part of his background check process. Since these violations carry criminal penalties of up to 5 years in prison, we're providing your responses to Special Counsel Robert Mueller." Thanks for the info on this guy you were in business with. What you told us means he's going to prison. The congressman then asked for further documentation about Mike Flynn's communications with foreign governments and foreigners about this business deal. They asked these business associates of Flynn to prepare to come in and testify to Congress on these matters. But then they raised this one very provocative question. This trip to the Middle East to promote this plan, these payments that Flynn got to be involved in this potential deal, was this just 2015? Did this thing actually end then? Or did it keep going on? Is it still going on? Did Flynn still have a hand in on this Russian nuclear deal during the campaign? Maybe even while he was in the White House? Here's how they put it in the letter. Your responses suggest that you and other officials at your companies may have discussed this matter with Trump administration officials during and after Mike Flynn's tenure at the White House. Quote, "The American people deserve to know whether General Flynn was secretly promoting the private interests of these businesses while he was a campaign advisor, a transition official, or President Trump's national security advisor." So, big new alarming question here, right? In terms of national security, in terms of foreign influence on our own government, and in terms of corruption and conflict of interest. Was the Trump national security advisor, Mike Flynn, secretly pursuing or trying to advance a gigantic Russian business deal? Or was he being paid to promote one while he was working in the White House as national security advisor? So that was that letter raising that provocative question. That letter from Cummings and Engel, that was in my email inbox at 7:30 this morning. By 3 o'clock this afternoon, the answer had arrived in the Wall Street Journal. See the headline, "Flynn promoted nuclear plant project while in the White House." This prospect raised by these congressmen this morning is answered and confirmed by the Wall Street Journal this afternoon. The Journal describes the Russian nuclear deal as potentially being worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Once he was national security advisor in the Trump White House, the Journal reports that Mike Flynn did direct National Security Council staff to meet with the companies involved in the Russian nuclear project. The Journal cites former National Security Council staffers as being basically horrified by what Flynn was doing, describing what he did as, quote, outside normal channels and, quote, not the way things were supposed to go, and, quote, highly abnormal. According to the Journal, the ethics advisors on the National Security Council actually told Flynn to remove himself from this project, but, quote, the activity continued. So if you're keeping track at home, the man who Donald Trump installed as the top national security official in the White House did not disclose thousands of dollars he was paid by a Russian air cargo company that was tied to the Russian government in the summer of 2015. He did not disclose thousands of dollars he was paid by a Russian software company tied to the Russian intelligence services in the fall of 2015. He did not disclose thousands of dollars and a free trip to Moscow for him and his son that were provided to him in the winter of 2015 by a Russian state-run media company. Nor did he obtain permission from the U.S. military to take that trip to Moscow, to take that money from the Russian government, or to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin, all of which he was supposed to do. He was warned he was supposed to do it, and he didn't do it anyway. He then did not disclose that entities linked to the Turkish government were paying him hundreds of thousands of dollars to represent the Turkish government's interests during the campaign. He then did not disclose his contacts with Russian government officials during the presidential transition. He specifically did not disclose that his contacts with Russian government officials during the campaign and during the transition included him talking about Russian sanctions with them. And now we know he didn't disclose his paid involvement and his paid foreign travel to promote a gigantic Russian nuclear business deal in the Middle East in 2015 during the transition and even during his short-lived time as national security advisor. And now the special counsel would also like a word with his son, please, as well. At the national security blog Just Security today, they did a Q&A with somebody who used to work in the Office of Legal Counsel at the White House. On this last point that was disclosed today by these two Democrats on the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Oversight Committee. They asked about basically how big a legal deal it is that Flynn didn't disclose this Russian nuclear deal and the trip that he took to promote it. Quote, question. If Flynn did indeed take this Middle East trip about the Russian nuclear deal, and he failed to disclose it on his security clearance form, is that significant? Answer. An undisclosed effort to help broker a deal for Russian government entities is a huge revelation in the context of the Russia investigations. It could be significant legally as it relates to FARA, the Foreign Agent Registration Act, false statements, or Espionage Act investigations. The legal significance for each would turn on the nature of Flynn's role in the deal and his mental state about his failure to disclose. Follow-up question. At this point, is it safe to say that Flynn has some serious criminal liability? Answer. Mike Flynn is in significant legal jeopardy of criminal prosecution. So there is one report tonight that Mike Flynn is again resisting a subpoena to testify to congressional investigators. I'm not sure whether or not that single report is true, but we can ask Senator Mark Warner about it in just a minute, since reportedly that's a matter about concerning his committee. But there's also news tonight about that second item on the list. One of those Russian-linked companies that paid Mike Flynn that he initially didn't think to mention when it came to his financial disclosures. Kaspersky Labs, one of at least 3 different Russian entities that started shoveling money Mike Flynn's way once Donald Trump started running for president. All payments that Mike Flynn initially didn't disclose. Well, today the Department of Homeland Security banned all U.S. federal agencies from using that company's software because of concerns about Kaspersky having links to Russian intelligence and the possible use of Kaspersky's software to help Russia spy around the world. And whether or not that decision today to ban the use of Kaspersky software by all federal agencies, whether or not that has any relationship to the Russian attack on our election last year, Kaspersky is now just one of a number of tech tech companies that finds itself at the center of these investigations. Within the past week, Facebook has just started to admit that they took Russian money for ads tied to fake accounts that tried to influence Americans during the election last year. Now we know those efforts included trying to gin up anti-immigrant protests in real life on U.S. soil. Now that Facebook is admitting to those things, there are increasingly urgent questions about whether or not Facebook is going to allow investigators to figure out if it was basically part of the crime scene for what the Russians did last year, and for the crucial question of whether or not the Trump campaign participated in it. But there's one last hard thing that got reported today, and if you've been keeping a close eye on the Mueller investigation as the best hope for finding out what happened last year and for bringing charges against anyone involved, then I think this may be worrying. It's about the Mueller investigation appearing to be stymied, appearing to be blocked in terms of their access to potentially critical witnesses. We have been worrying about this for the Mueller investigation for a while. We got some good concrete reporting today about how those worries are coming to fruition. That story's ahead with Senator Mark Warner from the Intelligence Committee. We got lots going on tonight. Stay with us.